From the JAMA Network, this is JAMA Clinical Reviews, interviews and ideas about innovations in medicine, science, and clinical practice.
Welcome to our listeners from around the world, and thank you for tuning in to this JAMA Clinical Review podcast. I am your host, Dr. Mary McDermott, Deputy Editor of JAMA, and I'm here today with Dr. Steve Kritchevsky, who is the Toby R. Alligood Endowed Professor of Geroscience at Wake Forest University School of Medicine. Dr. Kritchevsky is the author of a JAMA translational review on the topic of geroscience. Welcome, Dr. Kritchevsky, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start by having you tell us, what is geroscience?
Geroscience is an emerging discipline which is founded on observations from the biology of aging, which show us that through many different methods, it's possible to manipulate the lifespan and health span of animals. This has incredibly important implications, and geroscience is really translational activity to try to see if those insights can be applied to improve human health.
Can you give us some examples of evidence that support the geroscience hypothesis?
Sure. Yeah. So there are 3 or 4 pathways that, when manipulated, have repeatedly shown benefits in animal models. The most long-standing one is caloric restriction, and that's when you have animals eat less food than they would if they had all the food that they could eat. And typically you'll have a control group that gets all the food it wants, and the intervention group that will get some fraction of the calories that the control group gets. In some models, a 20% reduction in voluntary intake of calories will lead to a 20 to 25% extension in maximal lifespan. And that comes also with the delay in onset of many of the age-related diseases that animals will get. There's a pathway in the cells called the mTOR pathway. It stands for mammalian target of rapamycin. Rapamycin is a drug, and when it is given to mice and rats, it will extend their lifespan and health span as well. So we have quite reliable evidence that various kinds of manipulations, one behavioral I told you about, one pharmacologic, can have these benefits. And it's quite exciting, and the world is trying to understand if these insights can be applied to humans.
Now, your article talks about the difference between chronologic and biologic age. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, I think everyone has a good understanding of what chronologic age is. It's tied to the number of times you've been on the earth as it circles the sun, and every click is a year. We know that with chronologic age, the risk of many health conditions rise. I work in a section on gerontology and geriatric medicine, and we see that people of the same age have quite different health profiles. We see 70-year-olds who look like they're 50, and we interact with 50-year-olds who might as well be 70. And the idea of biologic age is to try to capture where are people's biology with respect to the ways that age relates to health-related outcomes. So 2 people could be age 70, but the person who has an older biologic age than the other will have higher risk of mortality, dementia, disability. It sort of depends on the metric, and it depends on the outcome.
And related to that, how do you measure biologic age?
There's no one standardized measure. There's a general approach to it. The general approach is you have a collection, and it's sort of easy to understand, sort of physiologic measures. And you ask the statistical question, what age of a person does it look like these measures came from? So if you're 70, but your maximum oxygen consumption, which is a very reliable measure, looks like somebody who's 60, your biologic age based on your exercise capacity would be 60, not 70. And so your biologic age would be younger. Mm-hmm. Now, it seems hardly fair to pick one measure and base it all on that. So most people in the field who do these calculations take a collection of measures and look at them in total to come up with a number for a person. And now, increasingly, there are more sophisticated DNA-based measures. Your DNA collects changes that are called epigenetic changes. In particular, certain base pairs have a tendency to add a methyl group, and that happens on and off as you age. But it's been noticed that with chronologic age, there is a characteristic pattern of changes. And so we have people calculating what are called methylomic clocks based on the pattern of DNA methylation. And these show the same things that the physiologic measures show, which is if your methylomic age is older than your chronologic age, you're at higher risk of age-related outcomes compared to the person with the same chronologic age, but a younger methylomic age.
Are there any measures that are readily available? Like if I'm seeing a patient who's 70 in my practice, are there any questions or simple, commonly obtained measures to get a sense? I'm just curious.
The things that we see in our aging-related research that we see as important bellwethers of aging are things like gait speed. People tend to maintain gait speed, and then as that slows down, that is a very important indicator of health problems to come. I guess if you're a cardiologist, you may be familiar with maximal exercise test. Your maximal exercise capacity also drops with age and is a very important predictor of health outcomes. And scientists are trying to collect data from electronic health records and come up with measures. They don't call them biologic age measures, but measures that also go up with age and are likely to reflect the burden of health problems that you've had up to that date, which is some indication of your biologic age.
And is the biologic age determined by genetic factors or lifestyle or both? And what can a person do to lower their biologic age?
Yeah, that's where the field is trying to understand, are these measures responsive to interventions or not? And what would those interventions look like? Now, the physiologic measures, so the measures that might be based on serum chemistries or physical function or other measures that are somewhat standard in clinical practice. If you happen to be overweight or obese, a great way to lower that age is to lose weight. It will normalize some of those chemistries that tend to go up with age. Some function is improved, and so that would work straight off. Whether or not that would have an effect on a different measure, like a methylomic clock, is sort of still under investigation. There are a few reports from smaller studies that your DNA age clocks can be changed, but I wait to see some more consistency in that area.
And can we go back to caloric restriction for a moment? You referred to it at the beginning. What's the evidence in humans, and is this something that you think we should all be doing?
Well, the evidence in humans is primarily from trials of people who either have type 2 diabetes or who are overweight or obese and have an indication for weight loss. In those studies, the groups that are randomized to weight loss show very consistent improvements in inflammation, which is an indicator of advancing or accelerated biologic age, a reduction in the onset of some diseases, some weight-related diseases. We did a meta-analysis of all such trials and found that people who were randomized to groups, the arms that had caloric restriction, had a 15% lower all-cause mortality rate. And we're beginning to see data from the GLP-1 trials, which is a very effective pharmacologic way to induce caloric restriction because people just aren't interested in eating, lower all-cause mortality in those studies as well. We don't have much evidence from people who aren't overweight. There's only one randomized trial that I can think of called the Caloric study, which took middle-aged folks, 20 to 50, who were not overweight and randomized folks to go ahead, eat as you have been doing, and the other group had a target of 25% reduction of caloric intake. They achieved about a 12% reduction. And this was a short-term 2-year study, so not enough time to see if mortality was affected or disease onset. But many, many of the aging biomarkers that are associated with the onset of those things were improved by the caloric restriction.
Your article talks about metformin, and metformin is commonly touted as an anti-aging drug for people without diabetes. Could you talk about the evidence for metformin?
Yes, I think the evidence of its anti-aging effect comes from people with diabetes. And it's clearly superior to doing nothing or watchful waiting. There's good evidence that it improves mortality and cardiovascular outcomes. It also, if you are borderline, have impaired glucose tolerance, metformin will prevent the conversion to type 2 diabetes. In much of the observational literature looking at the health experiences of people with type 2 diabetes according to which treatment they're on, those who are on metformin have much better disease experience across a wide range of health outcomes, including neurodegeneration and vascular outcomes, some eye outcomes, really quite a range of outcomes, which suggests that if this is for real, you might be affecting an aging process because you're affecting many outcomes that tend not to share that many risk factors. So the fact that there's a wide variety of them affected sort of pushes you in that direction. And there's some good studies showing that people who were taking metformin when they got COVID were less likely to die from the disease. I don't know of very much evidence at all that if you don't have type 2 diabetes, that this would be helpful. And I think that's a very important study that I hope can be done.
I wonder if you would share whether you take any over-the-counter supplements to improve your biologic age, or are there any that are particularly promising?
I don't. I have a justification that maybe sounds hollow, which is I think if you're in this area studying it, if you decide to take it, I think you lose the equanimity. I think you've voted, and I worry about my own ability to be clear-eyed on the evidence of something that I've already decided is good enough to take. So I would need a fair amount to push me to start doing these. I understand other people do, and I understand it completely, but I'm a little worried that it's going to undermine my objectivity.
That's a great point. In addition to metformin and caloric restriction, are there any other treatments that are on the horizon that you would really like to see well studied in a randomized clinical trial?
Yeah, there's a powerful immune suppressant drug, rapamycin or everolimus, where the side effects a little less frequent would be a very interesting one to pursue. So an important issue for something like that. So this falls in the category of drug repurposing. There is a drug that the FDA approves for transplant rejection, and at that dose, it has quite a few side effects. It's very possible that much lower or intermittent dosing would be just fine to have Geroscience benefit. So first thing that needs to be done is some dosing work to see what's the lowest dose. And then with rapamycin, there are a number of analog drugs which go by the name of rapalogs. And these rapalogs may have more specific activity with less side effects. And I'd love to see them studied in more detail. There's another age-related cell fate called senescence. Senescent cells are cells in your body that have been damaged to a point they're not removed from the body immediately, and they can secrete a number of cytokines and chemokines that can have both systemic effects and local effects that can cause dysfunction. And there are drugs called senolytics that are designed to remove these cells, and there are a series of trials ongoing, and some recently reported out, and it would be great to see more work in larger samples with these approaches.
Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I mean, the only other thing I might have mentioned was a lot of people are taking advantage of the fear of older adults in their age-related diseases and trying to market all kinds of things in duplicitous, sometimes misleading ways, and sometimes outright fraudulent. And it's important that physicians know that their patients are being exposed to this kind of stuff. And most of it that I've seen is at least just worthless, but it's certainly a waste of money.
Like what kinds of things? Are those like supplements?
Yes, supplements. I got a catalog for something called Telo Lift, which is some bizarre abstract. It's supposed to make your telomeres longer.
Wow.
There's a outfit trying to sell activated charcoal as an anti-aging pill. You'd be just shocked. Just shocked. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm Mary McDermott, and I've been speaking today with Dr. Steve Kritchevsky about his JAMA review on the topic of Geroscience. This episode was produced by Daniel Musisi at the JAMA Network. To follow this and other JAMA Network podcasts, please visit us online at jamanetworkaudio.com or search for JAMA Network wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
This content is protected by copyright by the American Medical Association with all rights reserved, including those for text and data mining, AI training, and similar technologies.